What is up, my beautiful gemstones? Welcome back to my channel, and if you're new here, just welcome. My name is Gemma Jade, but tonight it is the third night of our 7 Nights of Halloween special, and we are going to be discussing The Exorcism of Annaliese Mitchel. So I know for me, the movie The Exorcism of Emily Rose was one that stuck with me and that I had a really hard time getting all the way through. In fact, the only horror movie I've ever in my life been too scared to make it all the way through until this one was the original Exorcist movie. I knew from a very young age, thanks to one of my uncles that didn't realize an 8-year-old girl didn't need to know such things, and because he was a jokester, I knew that it was based on a true story, and that because I had been baptized, that it could very well happen to me too one day. That's what he told me at 8 years old when I was terrified and hiding under the covers on the couch watching that movie. Absolutely terrified me. Now, obviously, I was very much misinformed, and while the Exorcist movie was based on a real case, it was very loosely based on it. I have my own opinions about that whole situation, but that's for another time, and I'll just say that when I was little, with being a medium and already being terrified of every single shadow around me, including sometimes my own, what my uncle said to me traumatized me enough that I don't think to this day I've ever been able to watch the entire Exorcist movie. So, enter the movie we're talking about here today, The Exorcism of Emily Rose, that came out when I was 22 years old in 2005, and it was the same exact thing. There's just something about those movies that I cannot seem to stomach. I tried watching it several times and got most of the way through it, but then my oldest sister told me that I looked exactly like the girl in the movie, especially when she was doing all those weird things with her joints and like her movements, and I had had enough. I never attempted to watch it again. It still terrifies me just sitting here thinking about it. Well, The Exorcism of Emily Rose is based on a true story as well, of course with some dramatic details added in for effect, but the story wasn't as Hollywoodified as many movies that are like it. It's freaking scary, and that's why I've chosen to discuss it with you all here tonight. With all of that being said, let's jump right in and just get spooky. Throughout the world, since the beginning of time and across almost every culture, there is a belief in demonic entities that can possess a living human being. The beliefs of each culture, religion, and even of each individual person as to what that looks like, what it really means to be possessed by a demon, why it happens, and so many more variables varies tremendously. But the general theme of what it is, what it looks like, and all that is generally the same, at least for the most part. I can only speak in generalities here because these are meant to be somewhat shorter videos so that I'm able to get through 7 along with everything else that I have to do on a regular workday. But I think everyone watching this right now has their own ideas as to what demonic possession really is, what it looks like. So depending on your own personal beliefs, your culture, or which religion you belong to as well, the demonic entities will take on different forms and have many different abilities, but the one consistency is the absolute evil, malice, and darkness that comes along with something like a demonic possession. In fact, one of the ways people most believe that dark and evil spirits of the world seem to impact themselves upon our reality is through possession, which is, in its simplest terms, invading a living human's body for the purpose of taking control over it along with the mind. I mean, at the core of possession, there is also the want for the soul, but that's not something we can tangibly see, and therefore it isn't something everyone believes to be true. The belief in spiritual possession is a very widespread feature throughout a wide range of religions, such as Christianity, Catholicism, Hinduism, Islam, Judaism, and all throughout and down to the more obscure faiths like Wicca, Haitian voodoo, numerous African religions, and so many others. People have been taking protective measures against this type of thing since the beginning of time. But when a demonic spirit or evil entity does manage to take hold, the ways in which we try and expel it will again differ depending on our religious beliefs or lack thereof. The use of prayers, simple words, charms, rites, rituals, and so much more are all ways in which we could try to dispel or drive out the malevolent and wicked forces that have so insidiously violated the body, or more than likely the body of a person's loved one. Let's face it, it isn't often that someone's under the influence of demonic possession and goes seeking any of those things for themselves. It could happen, maybe in some cases, in their more lucid and aware moments, but it isn't what I would call normal for a possessed person to do. The evil has control and therefore isn't going to seek to have itself expelled. Exorcism is one method of defense against the sinister supernatural entities, and in fact is perhaps the most well-known and most widely practiced. Exorcism is an ancient practice and involves a concerted effort and attempt to forcibly remove or extract demons or lower vibrational spirits. Although the common perception of exorcism may be a purely Catholic construct, it's actually prominent in many cultures and in one form or another is practiced in pretty much every religion that believes in spiritual possession of any kind. Makes sense. You believe in possession, you believe in exorcism. The exact methods of the exorcisms vary greatly and very significantly across all the different faiths who use it, and it's sometimes believed that it's as simple as loudly and boldly commanding a spirit to exit the body of the living person whom it has been inhabiting. Now, I didn't do this on purpose, but think about last night's 7 Nights of Halloween video where we talked about Amy Stamatis and her demons and how they were exorcised out of her. That's exactly how Cindy Lawson did it. And if you didn't see that, you should go back and watch it. There are more sophisticated methods as well, sometimes entailing very elaborate rituals, but at the end of the day, no matter how someone goes about getting it done, everyone is seeking the same end goal, which is to eject the invading spirit or entity from their living host, or in less common cases, from a place. Yes, places definitely can be possessed as well. It's not exclusive to human beings, although I would say that it's much more harmful and could turn out deadly for a human being, whereas you might just want to steer clear of any buildings harboring demonic entities or that are said to have infestations of the same. We talked about several demon houses, the Demon House of Detroit, the Demon House in Gary, Indiana, the Ennins case, right? I did talk about this several times on my channel so far. Just like the aforementioned movie, The Exorcist, a lot of the time the rite of exorcism, no matter how it's performed, it doesn't go as planned. In some cases, the process is long and arduous, and it takes a physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, and even a psychic toll on the person for whom it's being performed. Not only does it take a terrible toll on the victim, but it almost always has terrible and horrific effects on the person performing the exorcism as well. It's just that each case has different presentation of how the damage has been done. It's actually not unheard of for exorcisms to go horribly wrong with the person who's possessed and the person performing the exorcism, both of them going on to have long-term and very lasting psychological and physical effects. So let's get right into the heart of the matter, the subject of this video, and discuss tonight one of the most mysterious, chilling, and downright terrifying exorcisms that we as a society know about, and look at how the exorcism of Annaliese Mitchel went so horribly wrong. I don't know if it's Mitchell or Mitchel. I'm going to use them interchangeably. You guys know who I'm talking about. It happened in 1975 and still to this day remains one of the most harrowing and unexplainable exorcisms in our known history. Annaliese Mitchel was born on September 21st, 1952 in Leibfling, Bavaria, West Germany, and she was raised in a family of extremely devout Catholics, which consisted of her parents and her 3 sisters. Annaliese had a rough childhood. Mainly, it was due to the fact that one of her sisters, who was 4 years older than her, had been born illegitimate. At that time, in that part of the world, an illegitimate child was a really big scandal, and it caused a lot of shame, especially for such a deeply religious family. Her mother was beset with extreme guilt over the child's birth and suffered greatly because of it in many different ways and forms. To make matters worse, the same child would go on to die at the tender age of 8 years old. I wasn't able to find out what the girl died from, but it made Annaliese withdraw from the world and spend most of her time in solitude and in prayer, trying to repent for her mother in order to absolve her of her sins. So she was repenting on her mother's behalf. In 1968, Annaliese was 16 years old and she experienced a very violent and very sudden seizure. Her family took her to the doctor right away, and that family doctor sent her to a neurologist, and they said that she had what was called temporal lobe epilepsy. She was prescribed increasingly powerful anticonvulsive medications, but nothing ever seemed to work for her. She started becoming more morose, more withdrawn than she had ever been before, and eventually she was taken for a psychiatric evaluation. She was then diagnosed as being depressed. I just want to say, when taking into consideration the place and time that all of this was happening, It seems like her family really did care a great deal about her, because it was very uncommon for people to bring their kids or to go themselves to psychiatrists back then. So they really did worry, and they really did try to do everything that they could, like medically for her, as well as religiously and spiritually. So anyway, the depression worsened to the point that it said Annaliese became suicidal, and she even ended up spending some time in a psychiatric hospital, inpatient, just for a little while to try and get the depressive episodes and convulsive attacks under control. Unfortunately, just like with the medication for the seizures, the medication for the depression wouldn't work. And this poor girl, when I tell you she could not get any relief from any of it, I'm not lying. Things got progressively worse as time went on. In addition to the depression and the seizures, Annaliese started complaining that she would see visions while she was praying. The visions greatly disturbed her and caused her a ton of mental anguish. The visions were only the beginning of bigger problems to come, though. She began to hear disembodied voices at various times of the day, and they started out as indistinct and distant, but soon they were very distinct and sounded like they were coming from someone that was standing right next to her, even though there was nobody there. The voices would berate her, threaten her, and command her to do things. And eventually, she started to see vivid images in front of her that she described as devil faces. These faces would randomly and suddenly appear out of nowhere, popping up right in front of her face and before her eyes without any warning. Guys, this is sometimes what mediums go through. Only I'm really glad that a lot of the time it's just human spirit, because I can't imagine. I can't even imagine what this poor girl might have went through. Psychiatric treatment did not stop these hallucinations either, and it wasn't long before both Annaliese and her family got tired of consulting with doctors and other medical professionals, because through the course of a few years, this had been going on for a few years now, they've been given no real help, in that nothing that they had ever done or given to her gave Annaliese any relief from anything that she was going through. Now, one thing you should know about Annaliese is that from a very young age, she had been deeply religious, but throughout this whole ordeal and over the course of some time, she started demonstrating an aversion to religious places and to imagery as well, like the crucifix. She once took a pilgrimage to San Damiano and ended up being unable to walk past a crucifix. She refused to drink from the holy spring. A family friend was on the pilgrimage with her and not only took note of all these things, but also noticed that at that time, the girl had some kind of strange odor all around her. It wasn't like body odor from not showering, guys. It was way more serious. Now, my sources do differ a little bit with both what she was said to have smelled like and when. Some say she smelled like burnt feces and only when she was in or near religious places, and others simply said she smelled like sulfur, but it was almost all the time. I also saw it said in several places that she would smell the strange smell of burnt feces, and that other family members and others around her would also smell it sometimes. Do with that information what you will, but I will say that I believe it was burnt feces and that she started to smell like that all of the time, only because that's what more sources said, and some of the more reputable sources reported those things as well. It's somewhat irrelevant except to be able to accurately tell her story. The family friend that was on the pilgrimage with Annaliese told the family all about what had happened on the pilgrimage, and she advised them that they should take the girl to a priest immediately. Now, you have to remember, this family was already very disappointed with the medical community and exasperated about what had been happening to Annaliese up to that point, and upon the mention of them possibly consulting a priest, they became almost immediately convinced that their daughter had been possessed by demonic forces, and that was the reason why she had been going through everything she had and why the medical community and science had not been able to help them. So they had not put this together. But when the family friend mentioned priest, they knew exactly what she was trying to say. Annaliese was under the influence of the devil or under demonic attack. The family considered that not only demons, but perhaps even the devil himself was possessing the young girl. Annaliese's family took her to not one, but several priests for consultation, but they were shocked when they didn't get the reception or the answers that they had been expecting to get. The priests told them over and over again to take their daughter back to the hospital to get her more medical attention and treatment. They argued that they had done just that for years and it had no effect on her whatsoever, and she was only getting worse. The family objected to the advice and finally started begging for an exorcism to be performed on Annaliese. But the priests told them them that in order for that to happen, they would have to convince the Catholic Church that there was real demonic possession happening with the young girl. Then they would have to return to the church and get the permission of the bishop. Only if they could meet the strict guidelines set by the church for determining demonic possession would they ever have any hope of having one performed on Annaliese. The family was frustrated, exasperated, and heartbroken, but they continued to try and find a priest who would listen, being turned away each time and told the exact same thing about needing permission from the church and the bishop. Getting permission from the church and from the bishop was the end of the discussion for all of the priests Annaliese's family had spoken to. But there was one pastor who was intrigued enough by the family story to at least investigate what was happening. His name was Ernst Oltz, and it said that he was investigating at first out of mere curiosity. He met with Annaliese, and over the course of his observations, he eventually began to believe that she wasn't epileptic, but was indeed under the influence and repression of demonic forces. Father Oltz began writing very passionate letters to the bishop, begging him to at least consider an exorcism for Annaliese. After a lot of hesitation, Bishop Joseph Stengel eventually agreed to allow an exorcism to be done on Annaliese. It would be done under the condition that it be carried out in total secrecy, and in 1975, he finally sent a priest by the name of Arnold Renz to assist Father Oltz in his task. The exorcism of Annaliese Mitchel officially began on September 24th, 1975, which was 3 days after her 23rd birthday. Surely, as the two priests knocked on their door that night in order to perform a secret ritual, an ancient rite on their daughter and loved one, the Mitchels had no idea that it would actually be the start of a terrifying 10-month-long ordeal that would end in the death of their beloved Annaliese. When Renz first got there, he spent a few moments with Annaliese and almost immediately agreed with everyone else present in that he thought she definitely needed an exorcism and was under the influence of not only demonic forces, but of the devil himself, itself. He began the rituals right away, and throughout that first night, and much to the surprise of everyone present, Annaliese claimed it wasn't just one spirit possessing her, but many. Listen, guys, I don't know if you've ever heard the actual recordings, the audio recordings that were taken throughout her exorcism, but I was only able to listen to one from that first night when she is talking about all of the spirits that were inside of her. I believe, I'm not 100% sure, but I do believe that they used the real audio in the movie. So whether you realize it or not, you heard at least some of it. I guess you could say the one that I was able to listen through to that I barely got through was the one that the demons themselves were saying, like they were announcing themselves. It was the most chilling and terrifying thing I have ever heard. And sometimes, even when I just think about those tapes, I literally have nightmares. Look them up if you think you can stomach them. They are on YouTube. All right, so there were allegedly many demons inside of and possessing Annaliese. The demons included Judas, Nero, Hitler, Cain, Lucifer, and many others. Now, I won't get into the fact about why people who are once living and human cannot be demons in the afterlife. So Cain, Hitler, that is not possible. But if you have questions about any of this, let me know in the comments or email or text me. During the exorcisms, one of the ways that Annaliese was said to have tried to gain some control back from the evil entities inhabiting her body and tormenting her was to perform hundreds of genuflections. For those of you who don't know what that means, it's basically just that she would inflict bodily harm on herself through self-flogging. She did so to such an extreme extent that sometimes it was necessary for someone else to hold her up because she became too weak to stand on her own anymore. She was trying to beat the devil out of her, I guess. I don't understand why she did that. And to be clear, she wasn't forced to perform the barbaric practice on herself, but she did it to try and show how sincere she was at trying to regain control of her body, mind, and spirit again. She was trying to, in those lucid moments, show that she was on board. She didn't want to be possessed. She wanted her soul back. You know, she was trying to encourage her family and the priests that, you know, she wanted to fight with them. For as little effect as the medications she was prescribed were said to have had on her other conditions that didn't actually exist, it was shockingly clear almost immediately that the exorcisms were taking an even more devastating toll on that girl. She repeatedly pooped and peed on the floors, and she was prone to licking up the urine. She would rant profane and maniacal insults at everyone present, and she would do that constantly. It wasn't uncommon, at least in her less lucid moments, when it said she was being most influenced by the demons, for Annaliese to growl and snarl like some sort of wild animal. Religious icons and imagery would cause her to immediately fly into fits of rage and animalistic fury, and once she spent 2 whole days under the kitchen table barking like a wild dog and refusing to stop and or come out. It eventually got to the point where her own family was too terrified to go anywhere near her, and so it was mainly the priests who were left alone with her most of the time, at least during the rituals. The rituals would last for 4 hours or more and were performed once or twice a week. Annaliese was said to speak in long dead languages like Aramaic and others that she had never heard, never had any access to, and that she otherwise couldn't have possibly known. She also demonstrated knowledge of things in general and of the people around her she had absolutely no way of knowing too. That is a clear and sure sign of demonic possession, and it's actually one of the things the Catholic Church and the bishop will look for when deciding if someone needs an exorcism or not, is can they speak in Aramaic, in these old dead languages, and do they know things that they have no business knowing. This went on for months, and a total of 67 exorcisms were performed on her, each ending in failure and total exhaustion for both Annaliese and the priests. Toward the end of the ordeal, Annaliese refused to eat and became an emaciated wraith, and it said that she was but a shell of the beautiful and bright, lovely young woman she had once been. If you look at before and after photos of this girl, you will see the tragedy that befell her, regardless of what you believe regarding what happened to her and what was going on with her, what was really wrong with her. She eventually just resigned herself to the fate of dying, which she saw was inevitable, and would say, or more like she would mumble, that she was, quote, dying to atone for the wayward youth of the day and the apostate priests of the modern church, end quote. On July 1st, 1976, after 10 months of failed exorcisms, Annaliese passed away in her home. At the time of her death, she weighed 68 pounds, and an autopsy performed on the body determined that the cause of death had been malnutrition and dehydration, and it was also found that she had been suffering from pneumonia at the time of her death as well. Obviously, this brought on an investigation into the circumstances surrounding her death, and Father Alt and Father Renz were questioned about what happened. The state eventually determined that Annaliese's death had been completely preventable, and that the priests had failed to do anything to stop it, and they were put on trial on March 30th, 1978. Mysterious Universe said of what happened next, quote, the trial with its spooky underpinnings and talk of ancient Catholic exorcism rites drew intense interest from the public. The affair was disturbing for most present. 47 of the exorcism sessions had been recorded on audio, and the court was subjected to recordings of the deceased girl snarling, growling, and vomiting forth obscenities. One of the tapes even included a recording of what was said to be 2 demons arguing with one another, both of them talking through Annaliese's mouth, but with distinctly different voices and timbres. In addition, various pieces of photographic evidence were presented that showed Annaliese looking shockingly ill, her eyes sunk deep within her sockets, and with bruises and seeping sores covering her face and body. Her knees had also been broken as a result of the constant, savage genuflections. This damaged, ghoulish appearance was in stark contrast to the pretty, vibrant-looking girl Annaliese had been before the horror had started. The priests were defended by lawyers sent by the church who argued that exorcism was perfectly legal and that the law gave citizens the right to religious freedoms. They additionally sought to show that the girl had displayed obvious signs of actually being possessed. For their part, Father Alt and Renz claimed that Annaliese had finally been freed of the evil inhabiting her right before her death. This whole defense argument clashed wildly with the prosecution's case, who opted for a more rational and scientific approach. The prosecution brought in doctors who testified that all of the symptoms shown by Annaliese could easily be explained by a combination of epilepsy, mental illness, and a fanatical level of religious belief. In the end, it was decided that whatever the actual cause of Annaliese's condition, the priests had not done enough to help her when her health had deteriorated so badly, and so they were convicted of manslaughter resulting from negligence. The sentencing was much lighter than anyone had ever thought possible. Each priest was sentenced to a mere 6 months in jail and 3 months of probation, with the jail terms later being suspended, end quote. The end of the trial didn't mark the end of the strangeness surrounding this case, though. In the aftermath of the trial, Annaliese's body was exhumed at the behest of her parents, mainly because she hadn't really been given a proper Catholic burial and had been buried in a cheap coffin. Many people who were there claimed that the body did not decompose as much as it definitely should have, with all of the time that had passed since she had first been buried. One nun who was there said she had some kind of vision of the girl's body fully intact, whatever that means. They didn't elaborate to what that meant. a vision of her body fully intact. So she didn't actually see it. I don't know really what that means. There were also medical experts who examined the corpse, and all of them said that she had decomposed at exactly the right rate, because of course they did, right? Of course. It can't possibly be demonic possession. That's just kind of annoying. It's like, I know that there are skeptical people, and I know that the medical community looks to science, but people do have a right to religious freedom. I know, at least in America, and apparently in Germany back then at least too, because that's what their whole defense was. They had a right to this religious freedom. No one can be forced to go and see doctors. No one can be forced, you can be forced to bring your kids to doctors. And honestly, I that's the right thing, absolutely. But according to the law, I think it's a little bit tricky. Where do you draw the line? Regardless of all of that, the police forbade Alt and Rents from viewing the body when it was exhumed, and many people say that was because they would have been able to see for themselves that they had been right all along and that her body had not decayed, which therefore meant somehow that she had indeed been the victim of demonic possession. The remains were then placed in a brand new oak coffin lined with tin, and they were reburied on February 25th, 1978. In another bizarre turn of events, a fire broke out at the Mitchel house in 2013, and while the authorities say it was a simple case of arson, there are those who believe it was the result of the same supernatural forces that had so horribly taken hold of Annaliese. The case of the possession and then the exorcism of Annaliese Mitchel still endures to this day, with many people holding it up as a genuine and true account of demonic possession. So what do you guys all think about this one? Was she possessed, or was there simply something medically happening with her that caused her to seem like she was? Or was it something else altogether, and that she was medically ill but saw how much attention she was getting with the whole possession thing, and so she just ran with it? Was it something else altogether? As always, let me know what you all think in the comments below, please, but also let me know why you think the way you do, please. I believe that this is one of the rare cases where someone was possessed by demonic forces. I think the entities were simply messing with the priests and the family when they were naming off everyone who they claimed was allegedly there. Because like I said, someone who was human cannot become a demon. So there's no way that it was Hitler. I think, demons mess with you. That's kind of what they do, and that's what they were doing. However, there's really no way to know for sure at all. So without anything else, that's all I have for you today, guys. Please give this video a big thumbs up if you enjoyed the content, if you enjoyed hanging out with me, if you enjoyed hanging out with one another in the premiere, and if you are so far enjoying my 7 Nights of Halloween special. Please subscribe if you haven't already, and make sure your notification bells are turned on so you can get notified of everything that I do. I've been doing a lot of shorts lately. Please support the shorts, like them, leave positive comments on all of my videos, come into the live streams if you can't watch them afterwards. Positive comments, likes, shares, guys, make sure you're subscribed. I am 60 subscribers away from hitting 3,000, so probably won't do that in the next 5 days, but hey, you never know. Let's get the word out there. I'm hoping to be doing big things. Guys, I love you and appreciate you so very much. Be kind to each other, okay? It doesn't cost anything. Be kind to yourselves and never accept anything less than others being kind to you. Check out the description box for ways to donate to the channel, ways to pick up my book on Kindle and paperback, and so many other important facts, I guess, about the channel, important things. If you have any questions, my email, all that stuff down in the description box. If nobody told you today you're amazing, you're beautiful, you can do it. Don't let anyone tell you can't do something or that you can't fulfill your dreams, because you absolutely can. I got your back. I am 100% behind you. I believe in you. Always go in grace, smile at a stranger, and happy Halloween.